nice to see you again. It's Petra here, and I am looking forward to showing you some more knitting goodies today. It's been about a month since I last recorded, and it has been so busy with work, my goodness. So we're down a team member. So just for a bit of context, I run my own business. I specialise in Google advertising, and so I run the business. I've got a staff, etc. We're one staff member down at the moment, and recently joined a local networking group, and so there's a lot more activity to do on that side, and then short one person. So it has been really busy. So it feels like my knitting time has been really squeezed. Generally working until 6 or 7 o'clock in the evenings, which isn't ideal because I've got young kids as well. I managed to, here comes the cats. So I managed to have my husband take the kids out this morning so that I could record a podcast. Otherwise it would be super noisy, but all the animals will probably be a bit curious about what's going on. So I'm expecting to have 3 different animals turning up throughout this. This one's my cat Raven. Yeah, anyway, so let's get into it. So yeah, just basically because it's been so busy though, I haven't been knitting as much as I would like, and so I haven't got much in the way of finished objects. I do have one finished object though, and might as well show that first actually. So my finished object is my knitted tam. That's what it looks like. You can see past the cat. And it goes, yeah, it's got little pine trees around it, and then hearts, and then this pattern on the top. Now the pattern was called, I did have it written down. Oh, actually I remember, it was called Forest Tam, and it was by Ruskin's Notes. And the yarn that I used was primarily Rowan Fine Merino, which has been discontinued, and this aqua blue is actually just a scrap yarn that's from my stash, but I don't actually know what it is because I got it as a scrap, so I've got no idea. Now the only thing is I can't wear this tam because it's too small for me. I mean, it looks like it should fit, but I don't know. It fits my daughter perfectly, but yeah, it would be nice if it was bigger. If I try and put it on, I'm not even going to, because yeah, my hair will just go frizzy. But it just looks more like a skull cap on me. It doesn't look like a beret at all because it's just too small for that. So sadly, it's been sitting in my daughter's room and she only wore it once. So I'm a bit disappointed in that. Anyway, now the other thing is I remembered that last week I did have a finished object last week, but I never showed you a full shot of it. So my daughter and my husband and I went for a little walk around our local area, and I asked my daughter, who's 6, to show me how to model clothing, because that's not really my area of expertise. My daughter, you'll see her in a minute, she didn't quite give me the right advice. She thought that her modelling was exceptional, but I think it turned out a little bit on the silly side, but that's okay. And just in case you're wondering, actually, she has lost 4 teeth. So 4 teeth all in the front. So if it looks like she hasn't got any teeth, it's okay. It's just normal teeth falling out. So I will include a video shortly just of our silliness, of us going on a walk and modelling that jumper. Alrighty, so next up, just thinking what I should talk about next. So I'll tell you a little bit about my work in progress. Let me show you a picture. So I hadn't been able to continue my 1930s stripes and mesh cardigan because of running out of yarn, and I've been having to dye up some new yarn. So I will also include in here some edited video from previously where I had just shown you the issues with that. I haven't entirely run out of yarn yet because I'm planning to alternate, but the problem is because I dyed the yarn, I can't get the exact match, so I will include some footage here in terms of just describing that issue. Okay, so I've run into a bit of a problem. Here's a jumper that already fits me well, and here is the sleeve cap that I need to create for the sleeve for my 1930s cardigan. And if I pop this on here, we can see I'm about halfway up. The fit looks really good. I just blocked it last night. Everything looks like it's fitting great, but that's all the yarn I've got left. Not much left. And because this is hand-dyed yarn, I can't exactly reproduce the yarn. It's going to be pretty much equivalent to getting a different dye lot, I guess, if I can work out how to get the same colour. But did I use a scientific method of working out how much dye to add to the water? No. I just put the yarn in and dumped a whole lot of dye in and said, hey, I like that colour. So now I have to try and reproduce the same yarn colour by dyeing up some more yarn, because I'm thinking this amount will probably get me up to maybe here. And if we have a look at this, I've got a triangle shaped sleeve cap, but then I've also got a saddle shoulder, so it's actually going to be going, there's going to be a strip all the way up to here. So yeah, this amount probably going to last me about that much. Now, so I went to purchase some more yarn to dye up, and the yarn is currently out of stock. So basically at the moment I can keep knitting with this, but if I do, there's going to be a really obvious stripe from one colour to the next, because there's no way that I'm going to be able to reproduce the colour exactly the same. So what I'd like to start doing is start alternating the this grey with whatever grey I come up with. And luckily I did already split the amount of yarn that I have in 2 equal sized balls. So when I go to do the other side, which, yeah, I've already got up to about here on the other side, but I'll be able to get to about the same amount on the other side without problem, and then I'll run into about the same amount of yarn on that side too. And so on both sides I'll need to start alternating skeins between the one that hasn't got enough and the new one, and then try and get up to the shoulder. So in terms of trying to get to a match, I think what I'll have to do is dye it several times and dye it a bit too light, and then over dye again to see if I can match the same colour, because if I dye it too dark then I won't be able to lighten it again, and I'll then have to buy yet another ball of yarn. What I might be able to do as well, because these balls come in 200 gram balls, I might be able to divide it in 4, because I think 50 grams will be enough, and then if I make any mistakes with dyeing, I've got another 3 balls left over that I can play with. So I might have to do that. So this 1930s garment is going to be paused, and hopefully will be resumed again soon. Alright, so moving on. Because I had not been able to work on the grey and black 30s top, I started looking at patterns, and I picked up this 1980s pattern book by Crucci. So this one's a DK weight, and I will insert some footage of my first attempt. I forgot to grab the yarn for that. 1 minute. I will show you. Oh no, it's okay. I don't need to, because in the little video clip that I took, I have shown you the yarn there. So yes, I attempted to make this with a bit of crazy yarn, which I fell in love with, but it's a bit crazy. And at the same time, I had also decided to combine. I was wanting to learn continental knitting, but I'll explain that in that video. So I'll insert that now. So I currently knit English style, but using the flicking method. I don't lift my hand while I'm knitting, but I have been wanting to learn continental knitting because I'd like to learn to knit a little bit faster. And whenever I look up how to knit faster on YouTube, the majority of the videos are how to knit faster using the continental method, although Irish cottage style knitting does come up as well. And look, I don't know whether my current style of knitting is reasonably fast or slow or what, because I don't really know how to compare that to anyone else. I know that knitting vintage garments does take quite a lot of time. And also I'd like to learn continental style knitting because I'd really like to knit some more colour work in terms of like entire sweaters. Like I'd like to knit a Fair Isle sweater soon. And at the moment when I do that, I do knit two-handed. So I am using continental knit stitches, but some of the vintage patterns are knit flat in Fair Isle, which means that I need to be comfortable with both knitting and purling in both hands, and also just making sure that I alleviate any tension problems. So I decided that what I needed to do was knit because I like knitting garments, so I thought I would knit a garment that was mostly stockinette so that I could test what tension is like. Yes, it might end up a bit wonky because my tension might start looser or tighter at the beginning and then change, so it might not end up being perfect, but I found this pattern in the Crucci knitting book from, I don't know the exact date, but it's definitely the 80s. So it says volume 21, and volume number 1 I've got as well, and it's from 1979. So this is probably late 80s or mid 80s. And what I like about this particular garment is it's only got 3 buttons down the bottom here. The rest of the cardigan is quite open, and I thought that would be a really nice cardigan because I can put some of the 1940s knits underneath and wear it like a twin set. I do find it fascinating. In the 80s they had quite a bit of shoulder pads happening. I might not create shoulder pads as big as these ones, but I'd like to add some shoulder pads. I do have another cardigan with shoulder pads in it, and I do like the look. But I also really like the hot pink yarn, but I don't have any hot pink yarn. What I did have that I've been dying to try for a little while, I have this yarn. And it was made in Italy. It is Linea Pio Italia SPA Giotto. And the interesting thing about this yarn as well is it has these very kind of Just unravel some. It has these very loosely spun sections, if you can see in there. And then it has these very tightly spun sections, and they're all mixed on the same ball, and the yarn just changes all the time, and it's barb poled. So all the way through, there's basically 2 different colours of yarns that have been barb poled across each other. And I've been staring at this skein, well, cone really, in my stash for a little while. I keep thinking that I want to use it for something, but I'm not sure what. And I think it's going to be best just in straight stockinette, to be honest. So I decided to test knitting Continental, and what I thought I would do is just start knitting on a sleeve. Because usually I do a gauge swatch, but I've been feeling recently that a sleeve would actually be better than a gauge swatch because it's wide enough that you can get a better gauge calculation from it than just a square. And so I started working on it in Continental. So I started this yesterday, and I decided to hold 2 balls together, and this is what I've created so far as a sleeve goes. So it's pretty interesting. Now, as it turns out, I probably won't continue with this as I have done, because when I hold the 2 yarns together, so a single weight of this yarn is supposed to be 5 ply. However, because the narrow sections are really narrow, so I'll show you that again. Where it's narrow, it's basically lace weight or thinner. And because of that, I didn't think it would be, it would have a lot of gappy areas in it if I knit it as a sport weight yarn, just because those thinner bits are very, very thin. And so what I tried doing was holding a double and seeing what the yarn looks like when I hold it double. So I do actually really like the way it looks held double. I'll just bring that a bit closer. I actually really like this. It's just got so many colours. It's really fun yarn. But the gauge is much higher than the gauge in the pattern. And that's exacerbated by the fact that I have discovered now that when I knit Continental, my gauge is looser than when I knit my English flicking style. So I have looked into redesigning the pattern in order to use the gauge that I have on here. But looking at it, the gauge that I have is so large that the smallest size in the pattern is still considerably too big. So really, there's not much point. I might as well just save this yarn for a project that uses bulky weight in the first place. So this particular pattern uses 8 ply. So in reality, all I needed to do was take the original one strand of this yarn and then maybe add a lace weight to it, or perhaps a mohair like is fashionable at the moment. Now the other thing, as far as a project for learning Continental goes, this yarn turned out to be absolutely horrible for that, because where those thicker parts are, it's really it's not spun at all. It's basically an unspun roving style. And what I'm finding is, because I'm not hugely confident with Continental knitting, I feel like I'm splitting stitches a lot. So it's just not ideal as a learning yarn. So that project will end up getting frogged, or it might not get frogged. I might just start again. So That's probably the only time you're going to see this particular project. Not necessarily the cardigan that I showed you, but I'll have to start again with a different gauge, different yarn, or at least a different combination using the yarn that I've got. So, in the future you may see that yarn in use still. Okay, well, I did progress with that project. I did not end up making this project in the crazy yarn, but I found this yarn in my stash. So it's a red one and this cream one. Now, you've seen this cream one before, and I held this one double, well actually triple, but I held one strand of this with 2 strands of burgundy in the last project that I knit, which was the t-shirt that you just saw me model. And this red yarn is the exact same yarn but just different colour, so I've run out of the burgundy. So it's a colour mark yarn. It's soft lamb's wool, and do I have the exact NM? No, I don't have it written down, but I can include that in the show notes. But basically it's a lace weight lamb's wool, and so I'm holding 2 strands of this one with 1 strand of this one, which gives me exactly the same gauge because I'm using the same size needles as my last project, and therefore I didn't have to knit a gauge swatch. I was able to use my project as a gauge swatch and measure a really accurate gauge because I've already washed that project, so I know exactly what the gauge is going to be after the garment is washed and is sitting in a normal unstretched shape. It's the thing with gauge swatches, sometimes you can still get it wrong because you knit a gauge swatch, you might pin it down and then it kind of blocks into this fake shape, but then when you go to wear it, it shrinks or stretches in a different way. So I now have a really accurate gauge, and I can use that to knit the 1980s cardigan. But because the 1980s cardigan was designed for DK weight yarn, I did have to rejig the pattern to make it work for my new gauge, but the maths for that is fairly easy for me. All I did was graph out the shape from the original, which you can work that out quite easily by seeing how many stitches they cast on and looking at the gauge, working out how many centimeters that is, or inches, and then working out how many. Sometimes the height can be tricky because if the pattern doesn't include the row gauge, then you might get into trouble. But most sleeves, I'm doing the sleeves at the moment, the sleeves follow a similar type of pattern where you increase every so many rows. So mine I'm increasing every 10, and then it gets the widest part, so you need to calculate how many centimeters or inches that is, convert that to your whatever your gauge is. So I was able to do that easy enough. And then you just have to work out what the final stitch count is at the shoulder, and then you want to have it in a way that you can work out how many stitches to cast off at the underarm, and then I've set it up so it's really easy because I'm only decreasing every second row on the right side, and that's really just basic pattern, but just change the gauge. So that one I have in my little chicken bag, and it takes me about a week to do one sleeve. So the other thing that I did was the original pattern had a 3/3, so a total stitch count of 6 on the cable, and my new yarn gauge is about equivalent to 4-ply, and it just looked a little bit small, so I changed it to 4/4. But yeah, essentially just a basic sleeve. What we got? One thing I did notice that was a little bit odd with the 1980s pattern actually was it ended at still a lot of stitches, and I think it's because of those ginormous the ginormous shoulder pads. So I went down to the number of stitches that I had calculated based on the pattern, which was going to be 56 stitches across. Cast that off, tried it against my arm, and the other thing that they do, so they leave a huge number of stitches on, but then they just did this 4 rows where they decreased really rapidly. It was bizarre. You don't really see that a lot in the kind of 1930s, 1940s patterns, which tend to cast off instead, and they tend to be a bit more gentle. This one was just knit 2 together, knit 2 together, knit 2 together, even some knit 3 togethers to just cast off really rapidly. And that made the fabric a little bit gappy around there, I guess, because you've got so many knit 2 togethers all together. But in any case, what I ended up doing, because I just didn't like that, it just looked really weird. So instead of going down to the 56, which I calculated, I went to 52, and then I still did that rapid decrease, but it's within my seaming allowance, I guess you'd say. So I'll be seaming through there, and hopefully you won't see it. But yeah, that's coming along quite nice. One thing I did do was I lengthened the arm a little bit as well, because I've got really long arms. So instead of coming down right at my cuff, having the cuff end kind of at the end of my arm, I like it to cover my hands a little bit. So I've got it coming to about there, which I just can't find anything commercially that has the long sleeves. So I like to add a little bit of extra length. And yeah, so I've got 1.5 sleeves. I've run out of yarn, but I've still got heaps on the cone. It's just that because I've got to do 2 strands of this one to the other one, I'm going to have to be futzing around with taking some of this off, balling it, and then creating a new ball with two strands. All right. So that's what I've been mainly doing. Look, this has just been a really easy TV knitting project, and I've been enjoying watching Poldark while knitting that. It's been a really nice show actually. I've been enjoying Poldark. Not like a nice historical drama. Okay, so in terms of the works in progress as well, I discovered a really old work in progress in my cupboard, and I'm wondering if I should do something with it. So this one here was, which is the right side and which is the wrong side? Here, that's the right side. This one here, it was a self-drafted pattern, and it's about 10 years. It's just been sitting, languishing in the cupboard for 10 years. The yarn, it's fully lace. it's just the same pattern over and over, which is pretty common for like vintage patterns. The yarn is Ramie, so 50% Ramie, 50% cashmere. And my intention was to create this really long drawstring type design, and it was going to be kind of like a bolero, I guess. Or maybe it's called a ballet wrap top, but it would be v-necked, and then this would actually tie at the front, like in a bow. But when I tried it on, I didn't really like how it was turning out, and also it took a while to do all this lace. At the time I had a broken toe, and there was a week that I had off work, and I knit a lot of it during that week, but it just felt like a bit of a slog, and it ended up in the cupboard, and I never worked on it ever again. So now that I found it, I'm thinking that I've noticed I haven't actually seamed it. This red yarn you can see is just like basting. It's not even really in the stitches. All I've got is safety pins in there. So it would be really not hard at all for me to take this front piece off, discard that, and knit a new front that was going to be similar to the back piece, and turn it into a proper fitted top. So I might do that instead of doing that ballet wrap look, because since then I've tried it on and I don't think it's going to be flattering on me. I don't have the same waistline as I had 10 years ago either, and it's just, yeah, I'm a little bit dubious about wearing it, so I don't really feel like finishing the project as it was. Okay, so what's the next thing that I was going to show you? So I have been attempting to dye some yarn, because I did show you this particular project before, and I ran out of yarn for this one. So I've been trying to dye some yarn, but my first attempt, I just messed it up. I completely forgot my process, and I ended up creating a variegated yarn instead of a fairly flat or tonal yarn. So that wasn't ideal. So then the second one I came up with was this one, which is actually not too dissimilar. It's just a little bit too dark, but it's not dissimilar. It's actually fairly close. So in theory I could use this one, but me being me, I purchased, these are the balls that it came in. So Luxury Frost by Bendigo Woolen Mill. They come in 200 gram balls, and to get free shipping I bought 3 of them, so I ended up with 600 grams of yarn. Wasted 100 grams on the first one that didn't work out, which I've since over dyed, but I'm not showing you that because it didn't really work out that well. This was another 100, and then my third lot of 100, I am going to include another little video just because it ended up a bit too light, and I'm weighing up whether to use this one, which is a bit too dark, or to keep trying with dyeing. This is my last ball plus half of the last one, so I've got 300 grams left. Whether to keep trying to dye it until I get the closest match that I can, and I'm not sure. So my joke is that I'm going to end up with 50 shades of grey, but in reality I could end up with 6 shades of grey, since I haven't got 25 balls of 200 grams of yarn. But still, I think that's going to be too many shades of grey, and it might be just as good with the one that's only slightly darker, especially since I did keep some of the other balls, so I will be alternating them. Right. So yes, I will be including a little bit of the video of my new dyeing process within this. Alright, so I added the RIT dye directly to the water when the water was cold in an old slow cooker. And the reason to do it cold is then we can put the yarn in cold as well, and it's not going to go blotchy like it would be if it was hot, because the hotter it is, the faster the dye can be taken up. So after we have finished adding the dye in, we want to give it a really good stir if we want the colour to be fairly tonal rather than variegated. So once we've stirred it, we can add in some vinegar. Probably I could have actually added the vinegar before stirring because I'm about to stir again. So the first stir is a bit of a waste of time. But make sure that the vinegar and the dye are really even and that the water is still cold. Now, while all of this has been happening, I actually had my yarn soaking in water, and you want it to soak for long enough that any air bubbles have come out. And then I want to put the yarn into the cold water after stirring. And what this will do is it will let the dye slowly soak into the yarn, and it won't catch straight away like it would have if I'd put dry yarn in. Definitely make sure that all the yarn is submerged under the water. You can give the yarn a good stir if you want, but mine was getting caught on my little wooden spatula. But yeah, if you give it a good stir, then that will also help to make it quite even. And in my case, because I'm using an old slow cooker, I just wrote no food on there so that no one would come and use it for anything else. All right. So that's it in terms of things that I've done, but I do have some acquisitions, so I will show you those as well. And I've tried to be good. I haven't had any new yarn acquisitions, but I do have some other vintage things acquisitions. Actually, that just reminds me of another acquisition. I might go get something else in a minute. Right, first thing. So I went to an antique store last weekend and I went looking for knitting patterns. But while I was there, I found this hat. Now, I don't think this is an antique because the back says 100% wool made in China. However, this is the most fantastic, fabulous 1920s cloche. And I have never actually seen any shops selling this style of hat. I just really love it. And I've been wearing it and I've been getting compliments from everybody. Everyone loves this hat. Isn't it cool? It's got this just really great design on the side. So now I have decided that I need to knit all the cloches. I am just enamored by this hat and it looks really great with red lipstick. I was wearing it. I've just worn it heaps since I got it, so I'm really, really happy with that hat. And yes, I just want all the things. I just want all of them. I love it. So that's my first acquisition and I'm really stoked with that one. I believe I told you last time that I do really love quilts, and so I got some more quilts as well. These ones arrived from Etsy and were independent from my antique store trip. Now, I'll come back to that antique store trip in a minute because I do have some acquisitions from there. But there was so much stuff in the antique store. I would have just loved to buy so many things, but I was with my kids and my husband, and yeah, anyway, I'll come back to it. So from Etsy, I got this kilt. That's actually the back. The leather on it still looks absolutely perfect. And this one has really different colours from my other kilts. The pleats are all in really nice conditions. There's no holes in it anywhere that I can see. The only problem is this one has either been altered or was just designed for a really, really skinny person. I don't know what the waist measurement is, but unless I halved my waist size, which isn't going to happen, this kilt is not going to fit me. So my plan is to I'm going to go to a tailor, have the just the buckles moved, and I'll just ask them to put some other fabric on the inside part. So with the kilt, this bit's on the inside anyway. The leather goes through the buckle to do it up. You can see just how insanely narrow that is. Like, who fits that? It's like, it's only, I can only fit my head in there. It's ridiculous. I mean, I don't know who's gonna be that skinny, but yeah. So it's absolutely not wearable as it is. But the part on the inside, no one's even really going to see that, right? So so I'm just going to get them to put another bit of yarn there, another bit of fabric there, and move the buckle further back so that it can all be worn. Yeah. So yes, it's bizarre. I don't know how they did that. So I think it's been altered, because normally kilts seem to be designed for like a 28 to a 30 inch waist, and that is not this one. I also got a woven skirt from, look, it's probably the 1980s or 70s, but a woven plaid, and it's got kind of matching buttons going down. It's really lovely. I love the colour. I love woven, yarny things. Because I don't weave, I only knit. So when I see beautiful plaid things, I just love plaid because you can pick any colour out of the plaid and then the top goes with it. So they're just so versatile. But this one's a little bit big, and I'm going to need to have it taken in because it's too big for me. But this one's quite a long one, and it doesn't have the pleats or anything, but this one goes down kind of well below me, and it's lovely. I'm looking forward to having it fit me. Alright, now in terms of back to the antique store, my goodness, they were just amazing. And so the little town that I went to, it's called Strathalbyn. It's about an hour drive from Adelaide, where I live. And they have, I don't know, about 4 or more antique stores all on one street. And we went into the first one. The first one's where I got my hat, but they didn't have much in the way of patterns. They had some beautiful teapots and things, but not much in the way of patterns. Went into the second one, and it was huge. So I was wandering around there for a bit. My daughter was already starting to get a little bit bored. But then all of a sudden, I discovered a big pile of paper, and I got excited, and it said all knitting patterns, $1 each. And there was a lot of them, and I was so excited. So I just said to my husband, Dave, take Charlotte to the playground. I'm going to be a while. Don't expect to see me for a while. Anyway, so I had also acquired recently on Etsy, actually not on Etsy, sorry, through Abe Books, a 1930s knitting pattern, and the one pattern cost me $35. But it was worth it because it was 1930s Fair Isle. But I found 35 lovely booklets that I wanted in this humongous pile of booklets for $1 each. And I'm not going to go through them all, but I'm just going to show you the pile. And I'm going to do another episode later where I will go through these with you. But look how many I got. My goodness. I have just patterns. So many patterns. So many patterns. Ah, so exciting. And they're not all, they're just from different eras. But probably mainly 40s and 50s, I'd say. And yeah, they're just stunning. Just just stunning. Anyway, so I'll go through them with you another time because there are so many of them that there's no way that I'm going to get through them all today. And yeah, so that is so exciting. And this is the one that I got from a books. Now this one's a bit delicate, but this one's from the 1930s. And this one is just beautiful. I just love it. So I'm going to show you the patterns from this one now. And this is by Best Way, and it's called Fair Isle Jumpers for Women. Best Way Knitting number 31. And it's a bit fragile, so I tried scanning it, and my scanner doesn't quite fit, so I need a bigger scanner. I ended up taking photos of them all, but patterns are just beautiful. So that's one. Oh, so delicate. In some cases the pages are just missing. So in this one, I mean not missing, but not attached. So this one's actually not attached anymore. But they're just beautiful. That one is, it's just called a pretty pattern. And then the same star is used on two different patterns. So this one's called From the Tyrol. And it just uses the same chart. They charted it in, the two patterns are side by side, and they just supplied the one chart. Now this one, I think this one's my favourite. It is beautiful. This Hungarian rose sweater. It's called the Hungarian blouse. Isn't it just stunning? And so it's all charted. The chart's on the other page, but it's multicoloured as well. It uses green, light pink, dark pink, black, and white, or main colour. And it is absolutely stunning. And I think it wouldn't be that hard to resize really, because you can just use exactly the same chart but change the size of the garment. That would really be quite simple. Alright, this one is kind of two I'm thinking it's supposed to be, I wonder if it's supposed to be using the same chart, but it's not. It just says two delightful jumpers for sports. They're actually not related at all. They've got their own charts. So yes, two delightful jumpers for sports. There's one of them. There's the other one. And yes, they are delightful, aren't they? Now these ones coming up are my next few favourites are coming up. So I'm thinking of knitting this one in Woodland Hues. That's what I'm thinking of knitting. And the really interesting thing about this one, it doesn't use different colours. It uses the same colour but in different shades. So the original one was knit in mauve, and it's asking for a dark mauve, a light mauve, and a medium mauve. So that will just look really harmonious. This one here I find really creative actually. It's just amazing. I really love it. Really beautiful pattern. With today's new line. This one on the other hand, I think I would definitely like to knit. I really like this one. Definitely one of my favourites. I don't know if you can see it there, but the Fair Isle is on the waist tie as well as, so it goes from arm to arm. So as if you say knit sideways, arm to arm, but then the Fair Isle is matched on the waist high. I just love it. And this one as well. This one's a little bit more standard, but I just really like it. It's just gorgeous. So yes, I will have fun knitting some of these patterns from the 1930s. I have taken photographs of them all. So I probably won't be getting this actual book out again since the pages are all broken. But I will get it out again if I can get a larger scanner. Probably won't be investing in a larger scanner anytime soon. But if anyone has any tips for how to prevent silverfish from getting into things, that would be great. I do seem to have some in this particular house, which disappoints me. I didn't have any in any of my previous houses, but we do seem to have some silverfish in this house. So I'm not sure how best to keep this because it's a little bit larger than normal size. It's definitely larger than all the other patterns that I got. So I don't know why this one was so big. And in fact, part of the reason why it's damaged was probably because it had been stored folded. I don't know if you can see, but there's like a fold line in the middle. Someone had stored it folded because it was just so big. So at the moment I'm just keeping it in brown paper, but that's not really going to stop the silverfish, is it? Alright, well, I think that's actually everything to show you. I will go through, I'm not going to go through all 35 pattern booklets next week. I might just split them up and show you a few at a time. I've also got some other pattern books that I absolutely love that, but I'll just have to be a little bit more careful with those. They definitely would be copyright. So, but things from the 80s, I've got a few pattern books from the 80s that I just love, like Patricia Roberts, and I'd like to show you some of those sometime as well, just show the pattern pictures. And yeah, that's about it for now. So if you enjoy vintage knitting like I do, or knitting in general, and you'd like to hear from me regularly about what I'm doing, please subscribe. That would be really lovely. I'd love to hear your comments and respond back to you, have a nice chat around vintage knitting. Please let me know if you have a YouTube channel or if you're on Instagram. I'd love to follow what you're doing as well if you're into vintage knitting. And I'm really looking forward to seeing you next time. Alright, bye.